As far back as I can remember, I always wanted to be a gangster. Good fellas, wise guys.
April 13th, 1991, John Gotti's bodyguard and acting Gambino captain Bartholomew Bobby Boriello is fatally gunned down right outside of his Bensonhurst, Brooklyn home on Bay 25th, being hit twice in the head and 5 times in the abdomen after being set up by the infamous mob cops Steven Caracappa and Louis Eppolito on behalf of the Lucchese crime family psychopath Anthony Gaspipe Casso in his attempt to cause more chaos and weaken the Gambino family following John Gotti's departure to prison, which left John Gotti Jr. as acting boss at the time, and Gaspipe Casso was using this to his advantage in what some believe was his attempt to take over the family. For many years following the hit on Bobby Boriello, it was believed he was taken out to exact revenge for his alleged role in the hit on then Gambino boss Paul Castellano, but as it would turn out, this was just a rumor being put out there to hide the more sinister Machiavellian reason for the hit. Before we get into the details of the Bobby Boriello hit, let's first give a little background on who Bobby Boriello was. Boriello grew up in South Brooklyn, New York, where he was said to be surrounded by gangsters from the Colombo, Genovese, and Gambino families. Bobby and his younger brother Stevie were said to be enforcers for the Gallo gang and close friends to Crazy Joe Gallo and Larry Gallo. And according to sources online, Bobby Boriello was arrested 6 different times from 1967 to 1972 on various charges including assault, gambling, and weapons charges. According to Shadow and My Father, Bobby was originally a driver for Larry Gallo, but after Joe Gallo's murder, Bobby would leave the Colombo family and start making his way into the Gambinos, eventually being made in the 1980s. According to John Jr., Boriello would first meet John Gotti in a courtroom after Gotti had been incarcerated for the hit on James McBratney, and Boriello was in court for an unrelated case. It was there that Boriello later told Jr. he fell in love with the Dapper Don, seeing him dressed in a nice suit and having the famous and powerful lawyer Ro Cohn to represent him. Boriello would tell Jr. he thought to himself, "These are the big guns." So Boriello walked over to introduce himself and shake Gotti's hand. Gotti would then ask Boriello what he was there for, to which he responded by telling him he was on his way to serve time in Attica after accepting a plea deal. Gotti told Boriello he had friends there and told him to mention his name, which Boriello would later say helped him out during his bid. Boriello was Gotti's driver and bodyguard, as well as a close friend to John Jr., despite the 20-year age difference. Boriello was Jr.'s best man at his wedding and also at the house during Jr.'s making ceremony, and Jr. and his wife would also be asked by Boriello and his wife to baptize their son. Boriello was said to be a tough guy standing at 6 foot 2 inches tall, handsome, and was said to be a funny guy too. In Jr.'s book, he references a time when Boriello was returning to pick Gotti up from his daily haircut routine and pulled up on a motorcycle instead of the Lincoln he was supposed to be in, wearing a spike helmet to play a prank on his boss, but had another guy following him with the car so he could quickly jump back in the car and drive Gotti where he needed to go. Boriello was said to be protective of Gotti and always have his back. Even if Gotti went to the bathroom, Boriello would follow him and look out. He was said to be an official street guy, but would also sometimes have money issues due to his excessive gambling and habit of covering the bill when the guys were out. According to online sources, Bobby Boriello was said to be one of Gotti's main shooters, on top of being his bodyguard and driver. And before his time with the Gambinos while with the Gallo brothers, Boriello served as a hitter and soldier during the Gallo-Profaci War and during the second phase of the war between the Gallos, Colombos, and Persico factions. It's also said Boriello was one of the men who helped take out the man who took a shot at Gotti. as discussed in my recent video on Joe the German Watts. Following the man firing shots at Gotti, Boriello was said to always be around Gotti, making sure he was protected, which would ultimately be one of the main reasons he was targeted. According to numerous different sources, the story goes that Vincent The Chin Gigante was furious at Gotti and his crew for the unsanctioned hit on Paul Castellano, and has been claimed that The Chin was conspiring with Anthony Gaspipe Casso to avenge Castellano's death, which would lead to the car bombing on Gambino member Frank DeChico, who some say was intended to take out the Teflon Don himself, as well as the murder of Eppolito. But some people believe Gaspipe was taking these liberties on his own in his own attempt to take over the Gambino family. Whichever theory you choose to subscribe to, the story goes that after Gotti's incarceration in 1991, Gotti Jr. was promoted to acting boss of the family, and some of the other families were still upset about Big Paul's murder and also didn't think Jr. had the experience to lead a family at the time, so they believed with Gotti away, now would be their best shot to make their move and try to overthrow the family. Casso at the time was underboss of the Lucchese's and was on the run ducking racketeering charges from the government, but it said Casso was still calling the shots from behind the scenes. First, Casso would turn to the mob cops Steven Caracappa and Louis Eppolito to confirm Boriello's address by sending them over to Boriello's home, where Eppolito was said to have went and knocked on the door, gun and police badge in hand, and asked if Bobby lived there. Boriello's wife responded by saying her husband wasn't home and thought nothing else of it. Eppolito never gave his name, and Boriello's wife wouldn't make the connection between the cop and her husband's death until years later, when the two crooked cops were arrested on multiple murders and various other charges, and she seen Eppolito's face on the news. The two dirty policemen were eventually charged with the murder conspiracy against Boriello, although they weren't the ones who pulled the trigger. According to what Jr. states in his book, they found out the Lucchese's were behind the Boriello hit through an unnamed Lucchese member who entered MCC while Gotti was being held there, and in Jr.'s words, this guy was, quote, smitten with the Teflon Don and started gossiping. They were given the family who was behind the hit, but the man was never able to tell them exactly who ordered it. But after putting the pieces together, it became clear that it was Casso. According to Shadow and my father, the day of the hit, Gotti Jr. and Boriello had just had lunch together at the Bergen Hunt and Fish Club, along with about 50 other Gambino members, which was a tradition the men kept alive in Gotti's absence in order to keep his spirit present in the family. And because when push came to shove, the men knew Jr. would be reporting back to Senior and wanted to make sure they were showing face in case he were ever to be released. The men just finished eating lasagna and veal cutlets, and according to Jr., before leaving, Boriello got an extra jar of sauce from longtime Gambino acquaintance Jackie Cavallo, who was cooking the meal that day. And then the two men split and went their separate ways. The next thing we know is upon Boriello pulling into his driveway, his wife Sue, who was in the kitchen feeding their baby, heard the car pull up and heard him yell, "What the fuck are you doing here? Get the fuck," and then a succession of gunfire. When she ran to the door, she would see her husband lying dead at the end of her driveway, riddled with bullets in a pool of his own blood, in an unknown car speeding away. It's also said Boriello was able to throw the jar of sauce at his attackers. Now, not only did his wife see him dead, but his 2-year-old son, who also heard the car pull up, ran to the window to see his father, but instead would actually see his father being shot to death by who would later be identified as Big Frank Listorino. Police would find 10 shells near the scene of the crime from a .380 caliber semi-automatic pistol, and Boriello was hit a total of 7 times. It's unsure if more men were present with Listorino or if he was the only lone shooter, but what we do know is that the mob cops Steven Caracappa and Louis Eppolito were being paid $4,000 a month by Anthony Gaspipe Casso to provide him with inside information and another few $1,000s for every hit they carried out for him. And through various informants, it said that Gaspipe originally passed the order down to Caracappa and Eppolito while he was on the lam, ducking racketeering and conspiracy charges. But after other officers got wind, the cops were questioned by their superiors while they were looking into Boriello, and decided not to attach their names to this hit. But they did knock on his door and confirm Boriello lived at that address, and they passed it back to Casso, who then passed the hit to Frank Listorino, and the rest is history. Following Boriello's death, Gotti was originally told that Genevieve's crime family member Preston Geritano was responsible for the hit, and Gotti gave Boriello's brother Steve the green light to kill whoever necessary. But Geritano ended up being killed by his own brother 13 years later for unrelated reasons. Although Louis Eppolito and Steven Caracappa would be indicted on murder conspiracy, murder, and depraved indifference murder in relation to the Boriello hit, the prosecutor would later drop the charges against them for Boriello's murder after the judge told them to shorten their list of witnesses and instead charge them for 7 other murders they knew they could make stick. According to different sources, it said that the hit was well orchestrated, having a hit team to close off the block while the shooters followed him to his house. Boriello is 47 years old at the time of his death. Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed, please smash the like, subscribe, and notification bell for more great content. Thank you for your support, and thank you for watching. Until next time, it's Wise Guy TV.